Welcome to Craziest HOA Moments. This is what selective enforcement looks like. I am standing in my driveway in Meadowbrook, a development on the east side of Detroit where the HOA micromanages decals and guest passes like it is fine art, and Christine Reed is screaming at me through the cab window of a tow truck that is about to hook my work van. She is the rules enforcement chair, and she has decided that my temporary paper permit is invalid, even though I got it from the management company 3 days ago and it is sitting right there in my windshield. I am an appliance repair tech. I get called mid-shift to fix broken washers and busted ovens, and I need this van to do my job. Christine does not care. She is holding a clipboard, her face is red, and she is yelling something about unauthorized commercial vehicles and violation notices. And the tow driver is looking at me like he wants to back out of this mess, but Christine already promised him the hook fee. I moved to Meadowbrook 6 months ago because the rent was decent and the location was close to my service territory. The neighborhood is a maze of identical townhomes with brick fronts and narrow driveways, and the HOA runs it like a military base. Guest parking requires a dashboard pass with a QR code. Residents need a registered decal on every car. Street parking is banned after 6 p.m. Fire lane enforcement is so aggressive that people get booted for pausing to unload groceries. The HOA name is on every sign, every notice, every angry email blast. Christine Reed is the face of it all. She walks the rows with a handheld scanner, checking plates and permits, writing citations on a tablet, calling the tow company the second she sees something she does not like. She loves warning letters. She lives for compliance. And right now, she has decided I am her next target. It started 2 weeks ago. I came home from a service call and found a notice tucked under my wiper. It said I had missed a hearing about my work vehicle and that my parking privileges were under review. I had never received a hearing notice. I checked my email, my mailbox, the resident portal. Nothing. I called the management company and they told me Christine had scheduled the hearing for a weekday morning when most people are at work, and she had only posted it on the community bulletin board by the mailboxes. I work 10-hour days. I do not check bulletin boards. The management company said they would look into it, but Christine was already moving to the next step. 3 days later, I got a formal violation notice in the mail. It claimed my van was a commercial vehicle in violation of the covenants, and it included a photo of my van parked in my driveway. The photo was dated 2 months earlier. I had not even owned the van 2 months earlier. I checked the metadata on the digital copy they emailed me, and the image file had been edited. She had recycled an old photo from a different violation case and changed the date stamp. I printed everything. I made a file. I started taking my own photos every time I parked, with timestamps and GPS tags. I also started noticing that other people had work trucks, contractor vans, even a landscaping trailer with company logos, and none of them had citations. I took photos of those too. I built a comparison set showing multiple cars parked the same way with 0 fines. I was not going to let Christine bully me off my own property, and I knew she was going to escalate. I just did not know how fast. A week ago, my neighbor 2 doors down asked if he could borrow my spot for 20 minutes to unload furniture. I said sure. I was inside making lunch. Christine saw his truck in my driveway and decided it was a guest parking violation. She did not knock. She did not call. She filed a formal complaint with photos and sent a notice to every homeowner in the row saying that guest parking abuse was out of control and that enforcement would be stepped up immediately. The next morning, I woke up to find a bright orange tow warning sticker slapped on my windshield. The sticker had bold red print and a phone number, no other readable text. It said my vehicle was in violation and would be towed within 24 hours if I did not comply. Comply with what? The sticker did not say. I peeled it off and went to work. When I got home that night, there was a new notice in my mailbox. This one said my temporary permit was invalid because it was not an official decal, and that I had to remove the van or face immediate towing and a $500 fine. I called the management company again. They told me the temporary permit was valid and that Christine did not have the authority to override it. They said they would send her an email. I asked them to put it in writing and copy me. They did. Christine responded within an hour. Her email said the management company did not understand the covenants and that she had the authority to enforce parking rules as the board saw fit. She copied the entire board. She also said, "This conversation is not a debate, it is a directive." That phrase stuck with me. It showed up again 2 days later in another email, and again yesterday when she confronted me in the parking lot. She uses it like a weapon, like saying it makes it true. I knew I needed help. I reached out to a guy named Tom who lives 3 doors down. Tom is calm, methodical, and he hates HOA overreach. He had fought Christine last year over a fence color dispute and won by bringing the actual printed covenants to a board meeting and reading them out loud until the board had to admit they were wrong. Tom told me to document everything, keep my cool, and wait for Christine to make a mistake big enough that the board could not ignore it. He also told me that Christine had a history of pressuring the tow company to hook first and ask questions later, and that the company got a cut of every tow fee plus a monthly retainer from the HOA. He did not have proof, but he said other people had complained about the same thing. I filed that away. Yesterday morning I left for a service call at 7 a.m. I got back at 3 p.m. My van was gone. In its place was a bright orange traffic cone and a notice zip-tied to my mailbox post. The notice said my vehicle had been towed for repeated violations and that I could retrieve it from the impound lot on 8 Mile Road for $650, which included the tow fee, the hook fee, a storage fee, and an HOA administrative penalty. The notice also said that if I did not pay within 72 hours, the fees would double and a lien would be filed against my property. I called the tow company. They told me Christine had authorized the tow and that they were following HOA policy. I asked to see the authorization. They said it was on file and I could request a copy through the HOA. I called Christine. She did not answer. I called the management company. They said they had not authorized a tow and that they were looking into it, but that I would need to pay the fees to get my van back and then dispute the charges later. I did not have $650 sitting around, and even if I did, I needed my van for work. I had 3 service calls scheduled for the next day and no way to get to them. I drove to the impound lot in my personal car. The lot was a fenced yard full of rusted cars and broken RVs, with a tiny office trailer and a guy behind bulletproof glass. I explained the situation. He said Christine had called that morning and told them the van was an ongoing compliance issue and that the HOA had authorized immediate removal. I asked if he had the authorization in writing. He showed me a printed email from Christine with the HOA letterhead. The email said the vehicle was a repeat offender and that the tow was urgent. It did not mention my temporary permit. It did not mention the management company approval. It was just Christine deciding on her own that my van had to go. I took a photo of the email through the glass. The guy told me I could pay the fees or I could leave, and that the clock was running on storage. I left. I went home and called Tom. He came over within 20 minutes. I showed him the notice, the email photo, the comparison photos of other vehicles, and the management company approval for my temporary permit. Tom looked at everything and said this is exactly what we need. He told me Christine had just crossed the line from aggressive enforcement into potential fraud, and that if we could prove she was getting kickbacks from the tow company or that she was ignoring management company approvals to boost tow fees, we could bring it to the board and force a vote. He also told me that the HOA had a policy that any enforcement action over $500 required board approval, and that Christine had violated that policy by authorizing the tow on her own. He said we should file a formal complaint and request an emergency hearing, and that we should bring copies of everything and ask for the evidence to be read into the minutes so it becomes official. I agreed. Tom said he would draft the complaint that night and file it in the morning. He also said I should try to get my van back as fast as possible. because every day an impound was another fee and another talking point for Christine. I called the management company again and asked them to intervene. They said they would contact Christine and request that the tow be reversed, but that it could take 48 hours. I told them I did not have 48 hours. They said they would do their best. I hung up and sat in my living room staring at the wall. My phone rang. It was the tow company. The guy from the office said Christine had called them again and told them to add a boot to my van because I was disputing the tow, and that the boot fee was another $200. I asked him if that was legal. He said it was HOA policy. I asked him if he had ever seen the HOA policy in writing. He paused. Then he said Christine handles all that and hung up. I called Tom back. He said do not pay anything yet and do not let them add the boot. He said he was coming over again in the morning and we were going to the impound lot together to demand documentation. If you are enjoying this chaos, hit that like button and subscribe for more HOA nightmare stories. That night, I could not sleep. I kept thinking about the email Christine had sent to the tow company, the fabricated violation notice, the recycled photo, the boot threat. I also kept thinking about what Tom had said about kickbacks. If Christine was getting money from the tow company, there had to be a paper trail. Invoices, payments, contracts, something. I decided to dig. I logged into the HOA resident portal and pulled up the board meeting minutes for the last year. Most of it was boring budget stuff and landscaping complaints, but buried in the April minutes was a line item approving a new towing contract with the company that had my van. The contract amount was not listed. The vendor name was not listed. It just said Board Approved Updated Towing Services Agreement. I clicked through to the financial reports. The HOA had paid the tow company over $30,000 in the last 6 months, which seemed insane for a neighborhood of 200 homes. I started comparing the payment dates to the board meeting dates, and I noticed something. Every time there was a big tow payment, there was a corresponding reimbursement to Christine for administrative expenses. The amounts were small, 100 here, 200 there, but they added up. I downloaded everything and sent it to Tom with a note that said, "I think I found the kickback trail." Tom called me at midnight. He was awake too. He said the reimbursements were suspicious but not definitive proof, and that we needed something more direct. He asked if I could get copies of the actual invoices from the tow company. I said I would try. The next morning, I drove back to the impound lot. The same guy was behind the glass. I told him I wanted to see the itemized invoice for my tow before I paid anything. He said he could not give me that without payment. I said that was illegal under Michigan Consumer Protection Law and that I had a right to see the charges before I was required to pay them. I did not know if that was true, but I said it with enough confidence that he hesitated. Then he printed a copy and slid it under the glass. The invoice listed the tow fee, the hook fee, the storage fee, and the HOA administrative penalty, but it also listed a line item called Expedited Service Surcharge for $300. I asked what that meant. He said it was a fee for same-day tows requested by the HOA. I asked who authorized it. He said Christine. I took a photo of the invoice and asked for a copy. He said no. I asked again. He said I could request one after I paid. I said I would be back with a lawyer and left. I sent the photo to Tom. He called me back immediately. He said the expedited service surcharge is the smoking gun. He said it was proof that Christine was authorizing premium services without board approval, and that the tow company was billing the HOA for it, which meant the HOA was paying Christine to generate more tows. He said we needed to present this at the emergency hearing and force the board to audit the contract. He also said we needed to move fast, because Christine was going to try to shut us down before we got to the hearing. He was right. That afternoon, I got a certified letter from the HOA attorney saying that I was in violation of the covenants, and that if I did not pay the tow fees and remove the dispute, the HOA would file a lien against my property and begin foreclosure proceedings. The letter also said that any further correspondence about the matter had to go through the attorney and that I was prohibited from contacting Christine directly. It was a gag order disguised as legal process. Tom said ignore it. He said the attorney was bluffing and that the HOA could not foreclose over a disputed tow fee. He said we should file the complaint anyway and let the attorney deal with the fallout. We drafted the complaint together. It listed every violation, every fabricated notice, every suspicious payment, and every policy Christine had ignored. We attached the comparison photos, the management company approval, the invoice photo, and the board meeting minutes showing the missing contract details. We also requested an emergency hearing within 7 days and asked for the evidence to be read into the minutes so it becomes official. Tom filed it online and emailed a copy to every board member, the management company, and the HOA attorney. Then we waited. Christine responded within 2 hours. She sent an email to the entire neighborhood saying that a resident was spreading false accusations about the board and that the tow in question was fully authorized and compliant with HOA policy. She said the resident had refused to follow proper procedures and was now trying to weaponize the complaint process to avoid paying legitimate fees. She did not name me, but everyone knew who she was talking about. She also said that the emergency hearing request was denied because it did not meet the procedural requirements and that the matter would be addressed at the next regular board meeting in 3 weeks. 3 weeks was too long. My van was racking up storage fees. My service calls were piling up. I was losing money every day. Tom said we needed to force the issue faster. He suggested we show up at the impound lot with a deputy and demand the van be released under a wrongful tow claim. I said I did not know if that would work. He said it was worth a try. We drove to the county sheriff's substation and explained the situation to a deputy. He said he could not order the tow company to release the van, but he could accompany us to the lot and verify that the tow authorization was questionable. He said if the tow company could not produce valid documentation, he could file a report that I could use in a civil case. He also said he could only stay a few minutes before another call, so we needed to move fast. We drove to the impound lot in 2 cars, me and Tom in mine, the deputy in his cruiser. The guy at the office saw us pull up and immediately got on the phone. By the time we got to the window, Christine was on speaker. She was yelling at the deputy through the phone, telling him that this was an HOA matter and that he had no authority to interfere. The deputy said he was not interfering, he was just verifying documentation. Christine said the documentation was on file and that she did not have to show it to anyone. The deputy asked the impound guy to show the authorization. The guy hesitated, then pulled out the same email I had photographed the day before. The deputy looked at it and said this does not show board approval, and this does not override a valid permit from the management company. Christine, still on speaker, said the board had given her discretionary authority and that this conversation is not a debate, it is a directive. The deputy looked at me, then at Tom, then at the impound guy. He said I am going to file a report noting that the authorization is disputed, and you can sort this out in civil court. Then he left. We had about 90 seconds of his time, but it was enough. The impound guy said Christine told him to keep the van until the fees were paid in full, and that if I tried to take it without paying, he would call the police and report it as theft. I asked if that was legal. He said it was HOA policy. I asked again if he had the policy in writing. He said Christine had it. I asked if he had ever actually seen it. He paused. Then he said, "Look, I just do what I am told, and if you have a problem, take it up with her." He hung up the phone and walked into the back room. Tom said we are not getting the van today, but we just proved that Christine is the only one authorizing this and that nobody else has seen the policy. He said that is enough to demand the hearing. We left and I called the management company again. I told them what the deputy said. They said they would escalate the issue to their regional supervisor and that someone would call me back within 24 hours. I said that was not fast enough. They said it was the best they could do. That night, I got another email from Christine. This one said that due to continued violations and refusal to comply, my HOA amenities access was being suspended. That meant I could not use the pool, the gym, the clubhouse, or the guest parking passes. It also meant I could not vote at the next board meeting. She was trying to lock me out of the process entirely. Tom said that was illegal under the covenants, and that amenities lockouts used as punishment and leverage were a direct violation of Michigan HOA law. He said we should add it to the complaint and file a supplemental notice with the state. He drafted the notice that night and filed it the next morning. Christine responded by sending another neighborhood-wide email saying that the resident in question was now under formal review for harassment and that any further complaints would be referred to the HOA attorney for possible legal action. She was trying to intimidate me into silence. It did not work. I spent the next 2 days pulling every document I could find. I downloaded the full HOA budget, the vendor contracts, the board meeting minutes, and the enforcement logs. I also reached out to 3 other homeowners who had been towed in the last year and asked them to share their invoices. 2 of them did. Both invoices had the same expedited service surcharge, and both had been authorized by Christine. I compiled everything into a single file and sent it to Tom. He said this is enough to prove a pattern, and if we can show that Christine has been doing this for months without board oversight, we can force an audit and possibly get her removed. He also said we should email the file to every homeowner in the neighborhood so they know what is happening. I hesitated. That felt like escalation. Tom said Christine already escalated when she tried to lock you out of the HOA, and now we are just making sure everyone knows the truth. I agreed. I watched her pile on threats, because that is exactly what I needed her to do. Tom drafted the email. It was short and factual. It listed the suspicious payments, the fabricated notices, the unauthorized TOWs, and the expedited service surcharges. It included a link to a shared folder with all the documents. It ended with a line that said, if you have been towed or fined by the HOA in the last year, please review your invoices and compare them to the attached records. Tom hit send at 8 p.m. By 9 p.m., my phone was blowing up. Neighbors were texting, calling, messaging on the community app. Half of them were angry at Christine. The other half were angry at me for making waves. One guy said I was trying to destroy the neighborhood. Another said Christine had been corrupt for years and it was about time someone called her out. A woman 3 rows over said she had been towed twice in 6 months and both times the fees were over $700, and she had always thought it was too high, but Christine told her it was standard. She said she was going to demand a refund. 2 other people said the same thing. By 10 p.m., the board president sent an email to the entire neighborhood saying that an emergency board meeting would be held in 48 hours to address the allegations, and that all homeowners were invited to attend. Christine did not respond. The next morning, I woke up to find a new notice taped to my front door. It said that due to ongoing violations, my vehicle access to the community was being revoked and that any attempt to park on HOA property would result in immediate towing and a restraining order. It was signed by Christine. I took a photo and sent it to Tom. He said she is panicking and this is proof. He said we should show up at the emergency meeting with copies of everything and let the board decide. He also said we should bring witnesses. I called the woman who had been towed twice and asked if she would speak at the meeting. She said yes. I called 2 other people who had similar stories. Both said yes. Tom said we should also bring the deputy report and the invoice photos, and that we should ask for a full financial audit of the towing contract. I agreed. I spent the rest of the day organizing the file and printing copies. The emergency meeting was held in the clubhouse at 7 p.m. The room was packed. Every seat was taken and people were standing along the walls. Christine was sitting at the board table with the president, the treasurer, and the secretary. She looked calm, but her hands were clenched. The president opened the meeting and said that the board had received a formal complaint alleging improper enforcement and financial irregularities, and that the purpose of the meeting was to review the evidence and determine next steps. He asked me to present my case. I stood up and walked to the front. I handed out copies of the comparison photos, the management company approval, the invoice photos, the board meeting minutes, and the payment records. I also handed out the deputy report and the notices Christine had sent. I explained everything in order: the fabricated hearing, the recycled photo, the unauthorized tow, the expedited service surcharges, the amenities lockout, and the suspicious reimbursements. I said that Christine had been authorizing premium towing services without board approval, and that the tow company had been billing the HOA for them, and that the expedited fees were being passed on to residents while Christine was getting reimbursed for administrative expenses that tracked with the tow DATs. I said the pattern was clear, and that I was requesting a full audit of the towing contract and a vote to suspend Christine from enforcement duties pending the results. Christine interrupted. She said the allegations were false and that I was misrepresenting the facts to avoid paying legitimate fees. She said the expedited service surcharges were part of the contract and that the board had approved them. The president asked her to show the contract. She said she did not have a copy with her. The treasurer said he had never seen the contract and that it was not in the board files. Christine said she had filed it with the management company. The president called the management company supervisor on speaker. The supervisor said they had a standard towing agreement on file, but it did not include any expedited service surcharges, and it did not authorize Christine to add fees without board approval. Christine said that was wrong and that the supervisor was confused. The supervisor said he was looking at the contract right now, and that the only fees listed were the standard tow, hook, and storage fees. Christine stood up. She said this conversation is not a debate, it is a directive, and that the board needed to support her or she would resign. The room went silent. Then Tom stood up. He said he had reviewed the covenants and that any enforcement action over $500 required board approval, and that Christine had violated that rule at least a dozen times in the last 6 months. He said he had also reviewed the reimbursement records and that Christine had been paid over $4,000 in administrative expenses that coincided with high-value tows. He said that pattern suggested a conflict of interest and that the board should investigate. The president looked at Christine. He asked her to explain the reimbursements. Christine said they were for her time and that she was entitled to them under the board bylaws. The treasurer said the bylaws allowed reimbursement for documented expenses, not for time, and that he had never approved any payments to Christine for enforcement work. Christine said he was lying. The treasurer said he had the payment records right here and that none of them had his signature. Christine said the records were incomplete. The president said we are going to table this and schedule a full audit, and in the meantime, Christine is suspended from all enforcement duties effective immediately. Christine exploded. She said the board was violating her rights and that she had done everything by the book. She said I had manipulated the evidence and that I was the one who should be sanctioned. She said I have done this before and people fold every time. The president said this meeting is not about the past. It is about the current complaint, and the evidence suggests serious procedural violations. He said the board would review the audit results and make a final decision at the next meeting. Christine grabbed her bag and walked toward the door. The president asked her to stay for the rest of the meeting. She ignored him. Then, as she was about to leave, the treasurer said for the record, "I am making a motion to refer this matter to the management company for a full financial review, and to suspend all towing activity until the review is complete." The secretary said, "I second that." The president said all in favor. Every hand went up except Christine, who was already halfway out the door. The president said the motion passes, and Christine, we need your response on the record. Christine stopped. She turned around. She said, "You do not have the authority to suspend me, and this is not over." Then she left. Someone in the back row said, "I cannot believe she just walked out on her own motion." The meeting continued for another hour. The woman who had been towed twice spoke and said she wanted a refund. The board said they would review her case. 2 other people said the same thing. The president said the board would issue a formal apology to anyone who had been overcharged, and that refunds would be processed once the audit was complete. He also said the board would be reviewing the towing contract and possibly switching vendors. Tom stood up and asked if the board would consider a policy change to require board approval for any tow over $200. The president said that was a good idea and that he would bring it to a vote at the next meeting. The meeting ended at 9:30. I walked out feeling like I had just run a marathon. Tom met me in the parking lot and said, "You did it, she is done." I said, "We will see." He said, "No, she is done. The board knows she has been skimming and they are not going to let her come back." I said, "I just want my van back." He said, "Call the impound lot tomorrow and tell them the board suspended the tow, and if they give you trouble, have the management company call them." I said, "I will." We shook hands and I drove home. The next morning I called the impound lot. The same guy answered. I told him the board had suspended the tow and that I was coming to pick up my van. He said he had not heard anything from Christine. I said, "Christine is suspended and you need to call the management company for confirmation." He put me on hold. 5 minutes later, he came back and said the management company confirmed it and that I could pick up the van, but I still owed the storage fees. I said the board is reviewing all fees and I am not paying anything until the audit is complete. He said he could not release the van without payment. I said I was coming down with a copy of the board motion and he could call the police if he wanted, but I was taking my van. I hung up and called Tom. He said, "I am going with you." We drove to the impound lot together. The guy at the window looked nervous. He said he called his boss and the boss said to release the van but to note that the fees were still owed. I said, "Fine, note it." He printed a release form and slid it under the glass. I signed it. He buzzed the gate open and I walked into the lot. My van was parked in the back corner with a bright orange tow warning sticker still on the windshield. I peeled it off, got in, and started the engine. Tom followed me out. We drove back to Meadowbrook in convoy. When I pulled into my driveway, 2 neighbors were standing on their porches clapping. One of them yelled, "Good job." I waved and went inside. The board scheduled the audit for the following week. The management company brought in an outside firm to review the towing contract, the payment records, and the enforcement logs. The audit took 3 days. The results were released at the next board meeting. The auditor found that Christine had authorized over 60 tows in the last year, and that more than half of them included expedited service surcharges that were not in the contract. The auditor also found that Christine had received reimbursements totaling $6,000 for administrative expenses that were not documented or approved, and that the reimbursement dates matched the dates of high-value tows. The auditor concluded that there was evidence of a conflict of interest and recommended that the board terminate the towing contract, refund all expedited fees to affected residents, and refer the matter to the State Attorney General for possible fraud investigation. The board voted unanimously to accept the recommendations. The tow company owner was invited to the meeting. He stood up and said he wanted to clarify that his drivers had been told by Christine to hook first and never ask questions, and that she had promised them extra fees if they moved fast. He said he did not know the fees were not authorized and that he was willing to refund the expedited charges and terminate the contract immediately. He also said he had recordings of Christine calling his dispatch line and pressuring drivers to prioritize Meadowbrook tows over other jobs. He offered to turn the recordings over to the board. The board accepted. Christine was not at the meeting. The president said she had been placed on a no-contact directive by management and that she was no longer permitted to communicate with residents or vendors about HOA matters. He also said the board was voting to remove her from the rules enforcement chair position and that a new chair would be appointed at the next meeting. The following week, I received a check in the mail from the HOA. It was for $650, the full amount of the tow and boot fees. The check came with a letter from the board president apologizing for the improper enforcement and confirming that the HOA refunds the tow and boot fees and clears the ledger. The letter also said that the board had adopted a new policy requiring board approval for any tow over $200 and that all enforcement actions would be reviewed by the management company before being executed. I cashed the check. 2 days later, I got an email from the management company saying that Christine had resigned from the board and that she had agreed to a settlement that included repaying the unauthorized reimbursements and agreeing not to hold any HOA leadership position for 5 years. The email also said that the tow company contract had been terminated and that a new vendor had been selected through a competitive bid process. The email ended with a line that said, "We apologize for the disruption, and we are committed to fair and transparent enforcement going forward." I forwarded the email to Tom. He replied with a single word: justice. Christine moved out of Meadowbrook a month later. I saw the moving truck in her driveway one Saturday morning. She did not say goodbye to anyone. The new rules enforcement chair is a retired teacher named Linda who actually reads the covenants before she sends notices, and she has not called the tow company once. My van still has the temporary permit in the windshield, and nobody has said a word about it. The management company finally sent me an official decal last week, but I have not put it on yet. I kind of like the paper one. It reminds me that I stood up to someone who thought rules were weapons and that I won. Tom still waves at me when I drive by. The woman who was towed twice got her refund and started a neighborhood group chat to monitor HOA spending. The board meetings are a lot less dramatic now, but they are also a lot more transparent. People actually read the minutes. The gate guard knows my van and waves me through without scanning. I still take photos every time I park, just in case, but I have not needed them. The bright orange tow warning stickers are gone. The expedited service surcharges are gone. Christine is gone. And I can finally do my job without wondering if my van is going to disappear while I am fixing someone else's broken appliance. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.